The explosion that shattered the quiet of Maple Ridge Estates was not the kind that levels buildings or claims lives. It was sharper, more personal, a thunderclap of retribution that rattled windows, set off car alarms, and sent every resident in bathrobes and slippers spilling onto the cul-de-sac like ants from a kicked nest. Thick black smoke poured from the perfect white chimney of 1427 Sycamore Lane, curling into the crisp October night like an accusation written in the sky. Karen Whitmore stood in her driveway, silk robe streaked with soot, blonde hair frizzed and half-singed at the ends, clutching a charred log as if it were Exhibit A in a murder trial. She was screaming, something about defective firewood and manufacturer liability, but the words dissolved into the chaos of flashing phone lights and neighbors murmuring behind their hands. I stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in my pockets, watching the scene unfold with the calm satisfaction of a man who has just seen a perfectly engineered system complete its final function. Because I knew exactly what had happened. For weeks, Karen had been sneaking into my yard under cover of darkness, stealing logs from the woodpile she herself had fined me for lowering community aesthetic standards. Every time I replaced the missing pieces, more vanished. So I stopped replacing them with ordinary oak. I got creative. In an HOA like Maple Ridge, reason is a foreign language. Karens only learn when things blow up in their face, literally. My name is Tom Thompson, 58 years old, freelance mechanical engineer, widower, 8-year resident of Maple Ridge Estates, a gated enclave of identical beige homes, white picket fences, and manicured lawns that looked like they'd been trimmed with nail scissors. I moved here after Ellen died, thinking the structure, the rules, the quiet, might keep the grief at bay. I was wrong about the quiet. The rules, though, those were ironclad. My backyard was my refuge. A smoker I'd welded myself from an old oil drum. A tool shed painted the exact shade of HOA-approved taupe. A circle of Adirondack chairs I'd built from scrap cedar. And in the corner, behind the shed and technically shielded from the street by a 6-foot privacy fence, my woodpile, neatly stacked, seasonally replenished, split with a mall I'd owned since college. There was something honest about splitting logs. The weight of the mall, the crack of oak giving way, the smell of fresh resin. It was therapy without the copay. Most of my neighbors were decent people. The Millers next door brought pumpkin pie every Thanksgiving without fail. Old Mr. Jenkins watered his roses at 7:15 a.m. sharp and waved whether you waved back or not. Mrs. Alvarez across the street left jars of homemade salsa on doorsteps like a culinary fairy. It was peaceful. Then Karen Whitmore moved in 2 doors down. She arrived in a white Lexus with a vanity plate that read Boss LDY. Mid-50s. Blonde. Always dressed like she was heading to a deposition. Tailored blazers, pearl earrings, heels sharp enough to stake vampires. Her poodle, Monsieur Fluff, wore a rhinestone collar and matching booties. Within 30 days of unloading her moving boxes, Karen had somehow become HOA president. No one remembered voting. No one remembered nominations. But suddenly there she was, marching down sidewalks with a clipboard, a measuring tape, and a whistle around her neck like a dictator in Lululemon. Karen loved 3 things: power, attention, and the illusion of saving us from ourselves. Her first official act was a neighborhood walkthrough with a Polaroid camera. She snapped photos of mailboxes that were insufficiently symmetrical, measured grass height with a ruler, and issued warning letters on stationery embossed with the HOA seal. The letters arrived in red envelopes, * urgent violation notice *, as if the FBI had taken up landscaping. My introduction came on a Tuesday, in early September. I was in the backyard splitting kindling when the gate creaked open. Karen stood there in a navy blazer and white capris, clipboard gleaming. "Mr. Thompson," she said, smile tight as a drum. "Your wood storage violates Section 4.2 B of the Maple Ridge Aesthetic Standards Code." I set them all down. "It's behind the shed. From certain angles, specifically the southwest corner of the Miller property, it disrupts neighborhood symmetry." I blinked. "Symmetry. Correct. You have 10 days to relocate or face a $150 fine." She turned on her heel and click-clacked away before I could respond. I stared at the violation notice. The paper smelled like her perfume, something expensive and aggressive. I didn't move the wood pile. I just stacked it neater, added a tarp in HOA-approved taupe, and figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. The thefts began subtly. One Thursday, I came home from the hardware store and noticed the pile looked smaller. Not dramatically. Just enough to make me pause. I'm meticulous. I count cords like a miser counts coins. 20 logs missing. I chalked it up to a glitch in memory. I'm getting older. Maybe I'd miscounted. 2 days later, another dozen gone. Then 8. Always overnight. Always the same pattern. Every other night, like a subscription service I hadn't signed up for. I started asking around. Anyone seen kids messing with my yard? Mr. Jenkins shrugged. Probably teenagers. Winter pranks. But no teenager was hauling 40-pound oak logs through the dark without leaving footprints or broken branches. I kept my yard immaculate. Paid dues early. Followed every rule down to the approved shade of mulch. And someone was treating me like a free lumber yard. So I set a trap. I carved small notches into the ends of the new logs, 3 shallow grooves only I would recognize. Then I installed a motion sensor floodlight above the shed. That night, 11:37 p.m., the light blazed on. I bolted to the window. A shadow slipped through the gate, something shiny glinting in the moonlight. Too fast to identify. Heels clicked on the pavement. Morning, for notch logs gone. Heel prints in the soft grass near the gate. Narrow. Stiletto. There was only one woman in Maple Ridge who wore heels after dark. The next day, another red envelope slid under my door. Dear Mr. Thompson, Your outdoor wood storage continues to violate Section 3.8, Fire Hazards, and Section 4.2, B, Visual Appeal. Failure to remedy within 72 hours will result in further disciplinary action. President Karen Whitmore. I nearly choked on my coffee. She was fining me for the wood she was stealing. I called the number on the letterhead. Voicemail. Left a polite message. No response. That afternoon, I drove past 1427 Sycamore. Through the massive front window, Karen never closed her curtains. I saw them. My logs. The notched ones. Glowing orange in her fireplace, stacked like trophies. She was burning my firewood while threatening me for unsightly storage. I could have marched over, kicked in her door, demanded answers. But I've learned something about people like Karen. Confrontation is their oxygen. They thrive on drama, on being the victim, the martyr, the center of the storm. If you shout, they win. So I smiled, went home, and started sketching. I wasn't planning murder. I'm an engineer, not a psychopath. I wanted education. Consequences. Something that would make Karen feel the weight of her actions every time she struck a match. I pulled out my old drafting pad, the one I hadn't touched since Ellen's funeral, and wrote in bold letters, Firewood Project. Underneath, Thompson's Thermodynamic Retribution. Inventory check. Hollow cedar rounds from a failed gazebo project. Black powder, leftover from 4th of July mortar shells. Bark glue, ash pigment, lathe access. One very justified grudge. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next phase required proof. Undeniable. High definition. Karen in 4K. I ordered 2 weatherproof security cameras, night vision, motion activated, cloud backup. Mounted one above the shed. Angled at the woodpile. Hid the second in the gutter overlooking the gate. You'd need a magnifying glass and a vendetta to spot them. Then I waited. Night 1, raccoon. Night 2, stray cat. Night 3, 12:14 a.m. My phone buzzed. I opened the app. There she was. Karen Whitmore, in a beige trench coat and scarf, flashlight in one hand, stacking my logs like she was loading a shopping cart. The camera's mic caught her muttering, "He won't miss a few. It's for the community anyway." She loaded 12 logs into the back of her Lexus, brushed her hands together like a job well done, and strutted off. I watched the clip 3 times. Saved it to 3 drives. Emailed a copy to myself with the subject line, insurance. The monthly HOA meeting was that Thursday. I never went, too much gossip, too many complaints about mailbox flags. But this time I arrived early. Took a seat in the front row. Wore my good flannel. Karen swept in 10 minutes late, coffee mug proclaiming boss lady in gold script. She tapped her pen on the table like a gavel. Item 3, she announced. Ongoing property violations. Specifically, Mr. Thompson's continued storage of unsafe quantities of combustible material in plain view. My jaw tightened. I raised my hand. Karen, may I speak? She smiled like a shark. Of course, Tom. This is a community forum. I stood. You said you personally documented my woodpile? Within the last 48 hours. Interesting. Because in that window, half my firewood was stolen. The room went still. Karen blinked. Perhaps you misplaced it. I don't misplace 80 pounds of oak. I held up my phone. I installed cameras after the second theft. Guess who showed up? I hit play. Karen's face filled the screen, smug, illuminated by moonlight, loading my logs into her SUV. The audio clear as a bell. Asterisk, it's for the community. Asterisk. Gasps. A few choked laughs. Someone whispered, no way. Karen's face drained of color. That's an invasion of privacy. My cameras. My property. Perfectly legal. I turned to the room. Want to see it again? The HOA treasurer, Mrs. Beasley, Karen's staunchest ally, leaned over to the vice president. Karen stammered. This is harassment. I cut her off. You were caught red-heeled. Laughter erupted. Even the secretary hid a smile behind her minutes booklet. Karen stood so fast her chair rolled back and hit the wall. You'll regret this. She stormed out, trench coat flapping like a cape. The meeting dissolved into chaos. People talking over each other. Someone shouted, "Can we get popcorn for the next one?" I thought that might be the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, another red envelope. Citation for unauthorized security installations visible from the street. My cameras. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee on my shirt. Phase 2 was already in motion. I spent 2 evenings in the workshop. Drilled out the cores of 3 cedar rounds with the lathe. Packed the cavities with measured charges of black powder, enough for a loud pop and a plume of smoke, not enough to hurt anyone. Think bottle rocket, not grenade. Sealed the ends with bark plugs, brushed with ash to match the stack. Indistinguishable from the real logs. I placed them dead center in the pile. Labeled them in my head, payload A, B, and C. Then I waited. Night 5 post-meeting. 11:52 p.m. motion alert. Karen again. Same coat. Same boots. Same self-satisfied smirk. She took 8 logs, including all 3 of mine. Loaded them into the Lexus. Drove off. I turned off the lights, poured a whiskey, and toasted the screen. The fuse is lit. The next evening, I was watching Mythbusters, fittingly, an episode about exploding water heaters, when the first boom hit. Muffled. Distant. Then a second, sharper. Then silence. Then screaming. I stepped onto the porch. A plume of gray smoke rose above the rooftops, backlit by Karen's outdoor floodlights. The air smelled of burnt oak and panic. Neighbors were already gathering. Phones out. Someone live streaming. I slipped on shoes and walked over. Karen's house looked like a movie set. Chimney belching smoke. Front windows fogged. The decorative wreath on her door was a charred ring. Karen stood in the yard in a silk robe now patterned with soot Rorschach tests, hair a bird's nest, waving a broom at a firefighter. It just exploded. I was burning a few logs and boom. The firefighter, a young guy trying not to grin, knelt by the hearth. Ma'am, looks like rapid combustion. Something in the wood ignited too fast. Are you saying it's my fault? Could be bad wood. Where'd you get it? I didn't buy it. She stopped. Realized her mistake. I raised an eyebrow from the crowd. Source locally? Every head swiveled. The Millers whispered. Mr. Jenkins smirked. A teenager filmed vertically. Karen glared at me. eyes wild. I have the footage, I said calmly. Morning after. The cul-de-sac was a circus. Fire inspection truck. 2 HOA board members. Half the neighborhood in pajamas holding coffee like it was a spectator sport. Karen wore oversized sunglasses and a floppy hat, still reeking of smoke. The inspector emerged from the house holding a charred log fragment. Found black powder residue in 3 logs. Fireworks grade. Small charges. Not dangerous, just dramatic. Karen gasped. He booby-trapped them to kill me. I sipped from my mug. You admitted on record the wood came from me. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I pulled out my phone. Want to see you stealing them? Again? Mrs. Beasley leaned in, pearls gleaming with curiosity. I played the clip. Frame by frame. Karen's face in 4K. Silence. Then a kid in the back laughed. Mom, that's the lady who yelled at me for biking too fast. The dam broke. Laughter. Head shaking. Someone started clapping. Karen spun to the inspector. Arrest him. The inspector shrugged. Looks like theft and trespassing to me. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Deputy Ramirez, calm, no nonsense, knew me from neighborhood watch meetings, stepped out. Karen rushed him. Officer. He tried to blow me up. Ramirez watched the video. Looked at Karen. Ma'am, this is you. Same car. Same license plate. That's theft. Her voice cracked. You can't. No charges yet. Official warning. Next time, it's official. She stared at me, desperate. You set me up. I set up cameras. You set yourself up. The crowd chuckled. Karen's composure shattered. You're all monsters. She stomped to her Lexus, slammed the door, and peeled out, tires screeching like a banshee. She wasn't done. 3 days later, a summons taped to my door. Special disciplinary hearing. Accusations, safety violations, unauthorized surveillance, endangerment. Signed, President Karen Whitmore. I laughed so hard the tape came loose. I spent the next 48 hours building a dossier. Fire report. Video files. Screenshots from the neighborhood chat. Asterisk, did anyone else hear Karen's chimney explode? Asterisk printed in color. Thursday night. Clubhouse packed. Standing room only. Karen at the head table, chin high, flanked by loyalists. Mrs. Beasley looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Karen launched into her speech. Mr. Thompson's reckless actions endangered the community. I stood. Let's review facts. I projected the theft video onto the TV. Gasps. Then the fire report. Then witness statements. Mrs. Beasley spoke up. Karen, we've all seen the tape. You're siding with him? You fine me for wind chimes. Laughter. Vice President Wilson, a retired attorney, quiet but sharp, stood. According to bylaws, the board can call an emergency vote to remove a president acting against community interest. Karen froze. You wouldn't. Hands went up. Beasley's. The new members. Then the audience. Near unanimous. Wilson. Motion carried. Mrs. Whitmore is relieved of duty. Karen grabbed her purse. You'll hear from my lawyer. Door slam. Applause. The aftermath was glorious. No more red envelopes. The barbecue ban lifted. Christmas lights returned, thousands of them. Karen's house sold to a retired couple who planted daisies and hosted brunches. One October evening, a familiar voice at my gate. Still playing with fire?
Karen.
Smaller. Hair shorter, darker. Sunglasses even at dusk. She'd come for a box left in the shed. You made me a meme, she said quietly. Internet's undefeated. She nodded. Took the box. Left without a fight. That night, the fire pit roared. Neighbors brought beer, stories, kids with marshmallows. Wilson raised a glass. To the man who reminded us bullies hate daylight. I lifted mine. To Karen. May her next chimney behave. Laughter echoed into the stars. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs a hollow log, a little black powder, and a woman who refuses to learn any other way.